Yeah, thanks to our Minister of Education, Sciences and Culture, Ms. Bettina Martin, as well as to all the rectors of the Universities of Applied Sciences of Neubrandenburg, Stralsund and Wismar, as well as the Universities of Greifswald and Rostock and the University of Music and Theatre for the supportive and warm welcome speeches. We would like now to continue with our second program point today, which is very important, which is our keynote speech entitled Sustainability from a Fuzzy Concept to a Guiding Principle. We are very excited to welcome our keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Jörn Dosch. Professor Dosch is well-traveled, internationally well-known. He has been holder of the chair for International Policy and Development Cooperation and Deputy Dean of the Economics and Social Sciences Faculty at the University of Rostock since 2013. He is also adjunct professor at the University of Malaya in Kuala Lumpur, one of the leading universities in Asia. He previously held professorships at the University of Leeds, Great Britain, and the Australian Monash University at the Malaysian campus, and also performed research at Stanford University, United States, as a Fulbright Scholar in Residence. He received his PhD from the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz, Germany, where he also qualified as professor. His research and teaching focuses on politics, international relations, and questions of development in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. He has spent extended periods of time in Asia since the early 1990s. Professor Dosch also regularly works as a consultant for the European Union's development program and has evaluated several donor-funded projects in Asia and Latin America. His publications also address complex topics such as minorities, migration, and forced migration, and he has evaluated multiple programs and projects within the context of development collaboration. I would now like to hand over to Professor Dosch to deliver his talk, Sustainability from a Fuzzy Concept to a Guiding Principle. If time, we will allow for 2-3 questions following the keynote speech. Please welcome Professor Dosch.
Hello, everyone. Yes. Thank you, Michael, for the very kind introduction. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here and share my thoughts on sustainability with you. I'm really thrilled to give this keynote presentation, and I can promise that I will leave sufficient time for discussion. I will just share a few thoughts on this very important topic. And I have to say that I was thrilled when I first learned about the initiative to have this summer school involving all higher education institutions in our beautiful state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, because it is such an incredible, important concept and a very important debate, of course, related to it. I'm going to share my presentation now. Well, I've given the keynote address the title From a Fuzzy Concept to a Guiding Principle. But maybe it's the other way around. We will discover during the course of the short presentation. Maybe it was more specific in the beginning and has become more fuzzy in the end. But obviously, once the concept had entered and found its way into public debates, few people actually knew what it meant. And today, there is a good and common understanding of what sustainability means. We will see a bit later on that it's actually a pretty recent debate we are talking about. So the term and concept sustainability has not been around for a very long period of time. Well, it's of course a very timely topic. It's always timely, of course, to talk about sustainability, but it's an important point in time, I guess, to have this summer school. If you just remember, just a couple of weeks ago, the report that was published by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, with its shocking findings. I think we all agree on that, that global warming happens much quicker than we all thought and had hoped for. So according to the report that was just published, climate change is not something that might threaten the very existence of our planet in a, well, hundreds of years from now, but even as soon as 2030, we could have reached the point that the global temperature has risen by 1.5 degrees, with very serious consequences for our climate. And when we look at the recent climate-related disasters, not at least in Germany, the recent floods, of course, no one knows for sure how much this is related to climate change, but I think all the indication is there, and there's a lot of scientific proof available and research and findings that there is, of course, a relationship. Although, you know, I mean, there's still many people who deny it, but say there's no such thing as climate change. But I think we can discount these views because I don't think I'm not an expert really on this scientific part of climate change. But I guess there is sufficient scientific proof to say, well, there is a correlation between the dramatic events that we have been observing in quick succession in recent years and the phenomenon that we call climate change. So again, it is a very important point in time to talk about this, and maybe there is just enough time now to reverse the situation, but you have followed the debates, I'm sure, about that. There are also many scientists who say, and we will hear from many experts in the field in the course of the summer school, who say, well, we might already have reached the point of no return. So what we've been doing for about 15 years, I guess, when we try to inform ourselves about something we don't know, we ask Google. What I always find interesting is to do a picture search, to see what comes up when we want to understand a certain idea or a certain concept. When you type in sustainability and do a picture search on Google, these are the pictures that you get, and they're very similar. And you get dozens, if not hundreds of them, which is, well, our planet, plants, the hand holding the planet, the sustainability icon, and everything related to that, which clearly shows that the usual universal understanding of sustainability is first and foremost environmental sustainability. But there is much more to sustainability than the environmental dimension, although this is the first dimension that was discussed and probably the most common one. But we also have other very important pillars of sustainability, and the discussion about these additional pillars, these additional dimensions of sustainability has emerged later. So first there was the idea of environmental sustainability, and I will talk a bit about the origin of the concept in a second. But very important is also social sustainability. We have economic sustainability, and we have political sustainability. Democracy, as an example, can be a very important pillar of global sustainability, according to many who say, well, if we do not move towards more democratization in the world, then it looks pretty bleak for the future of our planet, because democratic regimes have a much better track record in preserving the economy and the environment, and making the switch to sustainable energy resources. And very important, all these different dimensions of sustainability come together in the idea of the Sustainable Development Goals, the leading and really most important concept for development in the world today. I will come back to the Sustainable Development Goals a bit later, so I just want to mention it here at this point. Right, then we can summarize sustainability. This is the mainstream view, rests on 4 pillars, has 4 dimensions: environmental sustainability, social sustainability, economic sustainability, and sorry, this is a duplication, energy sustainability. And if you want to add the 5th dimension, that would be political sustainability. So just for the sake of having the correct word here, we add it here. Okay. Well, I did a quick research on the literature on sustainability. So there is a debate about what is the largest library in the world. Some say it's the Library of Congress in Washington. According to other sources, it's the British Library in London. It doesn't really matter. So let's take the British Library. So I looked at the catalog. It's very easy to do these days. You just do an online search in the British Library. And so today, when I did the research last week, I found more than 60,000 publications with sustainability in the main title. This is a sharp increase, as you can see here, from 4,300 in 2015. And then when you go back to the year 1990, you find by that year in 1990, hardly any book, paper, other document with the name, with the word sustainability in the title had been published. And before that, you basically cannot find any publications with sustainability in the title. So very clearly, this is a debate that started in earnest after the end of the Cold War and has particularly gained momentum over the past 5 or 6 years. And there are reasons for that, of course. But let's first look at the origins of the concept. So it was first mentioned, or actually the term was sustainable use that was first mentioned by the Freiberg chief miner Hans Carl von Carlowitz in 1713 in Saxony. And according to von Carlowitz, in order to implement sustainable management of forest resources, only as much wood should be removed from a forest as will grow back naturally. So here you have the first definition of sustainability, and the core is still there in our current modern definition of sustainability that we use. We should only use as many resources as will grow back naturally, so to speak. So the basic idea of sustainability is based on the principle that a natural system should be preserved in its essential and natural properties in the long term. And so, as you can clearly see, this approach laid the foundation for sustainable thinking and action. And then came the year 1987, when the concept of sustainability first got the official attention of the global community. And it was in this year that the idea of sustainability was developed into the all-embracing concept that we know today, away from forest management and the original meaning of the term and the concept. So the World Commission on Environment and Development, or short the Brundtland Commission, named after the then former Prime Minister of Norway, Gro Brundtland, deliberated about the future of our planet, our common future. This is also the title of the report that was published after the Commission had finished its work and its many rounds of discussions and thinking about the foundations of our future, the future of humankind. This is a long report. This is a detailed report, about 300 pages, and it coined our understanding of sustainability. So sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So here you can still find the core of the original definition of sustainable use that I have just shown you and introduced you to. So it contains the two very important key concepts, needs on the one hand, and second, limitations. So these two ideas, our needs, but the limitations of the planet at the same time have to be balanced. So, and this goes beyond the environment. So the environment and the idea of environmental sustainability, as I said before, is probably still the most important pillar, because we're really talking about the resources of our planet and how we can use these resources in a sustainable way so that future generations still have access to these resources and can still use these resources, and most importantly, can still use them in terms of supporting their livelihoods. But so the Brundtland Commission was the first attempt really to develop this holistic understanding of sustainability, and they introduced also the goals of economic and social development. And with it really comes the idea that there has to be a balance between economic development and the use of resources. Well, this very idea wasn't really that new in 1987. So in the 70s, there was already a debate going on about the limits of development and the limits of economic growth. But it was really the Brundtland Commission that provided this whole discussion and this whole debate with a very substantial and significant input. So what they were talking about in this very long report was the need and the necessity for progressive transformation of the economy and also the society. And I would like to highlight the last sentence here. Even the narrow notion of physical sustainability implies a concern for social equity between generations, a concern that must logically be extended to equity within each generation. So the idea of social equality, of social equity, the limits of economic growth, and balancing between GDP growth and the use of natural resources, all this became common knowledge. And since then, really, we have been debating it. So in the following few slides, I will give you just a few examples and a few ideas related to these four dimensions of sustainability. And first, talking about the environmental aspect and energy as a very important, renewable energy as a very important aspect and dimension of sustainability, and one, of course, that will concern us in the course of the summer school, and which is, of course, very closely related to our region, the Baltic Sea region. And I would like to, please forgive me for doing that, point out that at the Department of Political Science here at the University of Rostock, we have just completed a research project on this very topic. The publication will be out soon, within the next few months, which is about energy policy and energy security in the Baltic Sea region. So just a few highlight findings from our project, and I'm sure you will be familiar broadly with what I'm going to say here, but we thought it would make sense to produce a book which provides an overview of the energy situation, the energy policies, and the approach to energy security in all Baltic Sea states. So very important, and well, at the very core of the sustainability debate is the objective of the EU to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. So some countries, some governments say that takes too long, and you know, we also have debates here in Germany about that. Should we not be a bit more ambitious than 2050? It's also a topic that plays a certain role in the current election campaign. And some member states of the EU are definitely already a bit more ambitious. Sweden, for example, wants to ensure 100% electricity supply from non-fossil sources by 2040. But also, well, in Germany, we have certainly made good progress. Many say, well, it's not going fast enough and far enough. But just one figure I like to show you here. Here in Germany, the share of renewable energies in the electricity supply has risen from about 6% in 2000 to about 50% today, which I think is a quite remarkable achievement. But Germany is not yet among the leaders in the Baltic Sea region. In Denmark, our neighboring country, wind power alone accounts for about 60% of electricity generation. And to look at our own state here, we are way above the German average. About 72% of electricity produced in our state comes from wind, biogas, and solar plants. And so this share is to be further increased. Last year was an important year for many reasons, but one of the reasons why it was important is that, at least from a sustainability point of view, that for the first time, electricity generation from renewable energies in the EU exceeded that from fossil fuels. And this is a major and important milestone that was reached last year. I can give you some more examples, for example, from Norway, which is probably the most advanced country in the energy policy transformation process within the Baltic Sea region, where the production of electricity is based almost exclusively on renewable energy sources, and hydropower accounts for more than 90%. But it's a bit ambivalent as well when we look at Norway. And it's a double-edged sword, because Norway is also a major exporter of fossil sources of energy, oil. And so, as many have observed, while Norway is at the forefront of the energy transformation process, but it also contributes to pollution by exporting oil to other countries. And there are also several countries in the Baltic Sea region which still rely mainly on fossil fuels, for example, Russia, Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia. This is just an example for the very important energy dimension of sustainability, which is also related to economic sustainability. And these are a few pictures from China, well, it's very easy to single China out all the time for all the environmental sins that are being committed, and for the fact that there are many parts in the world, and we can also, of course, look at ourselves as our countries, where economic growth, where economic development, industrialization is still perceived as being more important than environmental protection. But you have some of the most extreme examples for that, for, well, a lack of really mitigating the negative effects of economic growth in China. There are pictures you might have seen before about the frequent smog in Beijing. And this is a picture I've taken a few years ago in Kunming. Kunming is in Yunnan province, which is bordering to Southeast Asia. So it's in the western part of China. And so these are pictures, posters that in a way idealize this lake, which is a very important resource for Kunming, which is the major city and the capital of Yunnan province. But so this is the reality. The water is green because for many decades wastewater has found its way into the lake, being completely unfiltered, and has contributed to turning this formerly, I'm sure about this, beautiful, very big lake into something very greenish and unhealthy and really dangerous. Just as one of many examples, and you know, back in the 70s, many of our rivers were also substantially polluted, but we have taken the necessary steps, of course, to clean up our water resources. Well, this has not happened in many other places, and this is really, really worrying. But again, I don't want to put all the blame on China and say, well, everything is terrible in China. That is not the case. This might be terrible there, but it's terrible in many other places too. And I think that thinking about really reconciling economic growth and environmental protection has still not gone far enough. And one of the indicators for this development and the fact that really, again, very much related to the report of the Brundtland Commission, Our Common Future, is the fact that we are overusing our resources. And this is highlighted by the Earth Overshoe Day. Again, you might have heard about this. You hear about it in the news when it happens in the summer. This year it was the 29th of July, which means on that day, 29th of July 2021, the Earth has reached the point that we actually have used up the resources for that year. And for the final 5 months of the year, we overdrew our natural resources, that it would take 1.7 Earth to supply the resources needed to sustain our annual global needs. Right? Last year it was a bit lower, and because Earth Overshoe Day happened slightly later. It only happened in late August because of the Corona pandemic. We used less resources last year than we usually do. But you can see here, since for about the last decade, since 2010, so Earth Overshoe Day always happens around late July, early August, which means we are constantly overdrawing our natural resources. And of course, this is a cumulative process. If we use every year 1.7 Earth really to satisfy our needs, you can see how quickly we will drain actually our resources. Moving now quickly to the issue of social sustainability, just to highlight what the Brundtland Commission noted in its report, that social sustainability is a very important aspect of the concept, which is prominently related to equality and equity in the world. And so we move ever further away from this idea of social equality and equity, not just in Europe, but globally. And you have many indicators to prove it. Just when you look at the average income in the world, you have the richest country, Qatar, due to its oil. That doesn't mean that everyone is rich in Qatar. You also know about the many social problems in this country, but while this is of course the average. And so we have the Central African Republic as one of the poorest, and you see here that on average a citizen of Qatar is 172 times richer than someone living in the Central African Republic, and you have the same striking differences and proof of inequality, of global inequality, when we look at human development indicators. For example, the expected years of schooling, the mean years of schooling, where Germany actually tops the ranking with 14.1 years, and also life expectancy at birth with the 52 years in Sierra Leone and 84.1 years again on average in Japan. Mortality rate of children under the age of 5. So this is bad enough. This is a snapshot of the situation today, but every year you actually see that inequality is not reduced, but the gap is widening between rich and poor, between those who have access to quality education and those who haven't. And this shows that although the world community has been trying to work on improving the social dimension of sustainability, globally, overall, unfortunately, although there are also some good examples from some countries, this also should be mentioned, but globally, the real success stories are not there yet. And I just give you another example, and inequality can be measured. This is the Genie Index, which measures the relation between the poorest part of the population and the richest part of the population. So the closer the value reaches 1, the more inequality we have. So one value of 1 would be complete inequality, and the closer you get to 0, the more equality you have. Or it is sometimes presented in decimals, or it's sometimes presented in percentage. So the other way around, here we have decimals, but you can also say, well, you closer to get to 100%, this would be a total inequality, and 0% would be total equality, where basically everyone, every citizen of one country possesses the same income, the same wealth. So you can see here the blue countries are those that are the most equal in terms of income distribution. These are the Nordic countries, but also Germany is in the bluish category, which shows that we actually, despite also the social problems we have in our country, no doubt about that, we still have a relative high level of equality. And the yellow countries are the most the countries with the highest degree of inequality, like South Africa, for example, or Brazil. And so the gap, again, is widening in terms of inequality in the world. And we can also see here in the case of Germany, so this is the these are the values for the whole of Germany, that inequality has been rising overall since the early 1990s. But there's also still a difference between the western part and the eastern part of Germany, where the western part is a bit more unequal than the eastern part. But these are not that, the differences are not that substantial. A very brief remark on political sustainability. As I said, well, according to some views, the political dimension should also be considered because democracies normally provide a better framework for governance in terms of governments thinking more about sustainability than autocracies, authoritarian regimes. Actually, when you look at the report of the Brundtland Commission, you find that they were very careful about that. And they said, well, actually, sustainability is not something that concerns a certain type of political regime, a certain governance type, but it's unrelated to that. Regardless of how governments are governed, they all need to think about sustainable development. And of course, the report was written during the end of the Cold War. So they were trying to make this also appealing to countries that were not governed by democratic governments, so that they wanted to avoid a situation in which this would have been labeled as a report for the Western world, written by the Western world. Right? So they said it applies to everyone. But now, obviously, we can probably be more open about this and less concerned. And so, and also since I'm a political scientist, I'm very interested in this aspect of sustainability. And so the hope, at least, is the more democratic our world gets, and we have seen here that the number of democracies in the world now exceeds the number of autocracies, so that there's better hope for a sustainable management of our resources and a more effective approach to sustainability in general. But, well, this is also a tricky graph that you see here, because democracies and autocracies come in many different shapes and sizes. And what we also see, and what is very concerning, is that countries and governments that are democracies on paper might be characterized by substantial authoritarian elements. Well, you know the discussion we have concerning some countries within the European Union. As political scientists, we talk about a process of autocratic recession, so that we actually see a trend towards more autocratic types of government, which is worrying. It's also related to the rise of right-wing populism all over the world, which is not encouraging. And what we can clearly see as a pattern is that right-wing populists are also usually those who deny that climate change exists, who are the least likely to think about sustainability. Finally, and I'm coming to my conclusion very soon, the Sustainable Development Goals. So everything that I have tried to address in my brief presentation and many more aspects were united under the roof of the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, which is now, if you like, the only game in town when it comes to development. So basically all nations in the world, with a very, very few exceptions, have agreed on this agenda, which is also called the Agenda 2030, for the development of our planet. And so the SDGs are remarkable in the sense that for the first time, a global development concept was not developed by Western nations for the developing countries. So in the sense of, well, we know how you do it, and now we have the recipes, we have the models that you can follow to achieve more income, to achieve industrialization, and so on and so on. But this is a holistic concept for everyone. Germany, Ecuador, China, Indonesia, Sweden, everyone is supposed to follow the same approach to sustainable development in the world. And as you can see here, the SDGs are broken down into 17 areas which capture the idea of sustainability. I don't want to read them out, but many more than I have described in my short presentation here. So according to the SDGs, sustainability also covers education, gender equality, very important. I've talked about inequalities and the quest to reduce them, then climate action, that goes for sure, but also peace, justice, and strong institutions. And so you have the aspect that I briefly outlined just now about democracy, which is not called democracy here. So again, to avoid a situation which might be perceived as, well, the West is trying to dictate the terms, but everyone agrees that in a way that sustainability has to do and is related also to governance, and well, without peace, well, there can not be a sustainable development, really. I think that this goes without saying almost. Well, by 2030, all countries in the world are supposed to have achieved certain goals related to the 17 areas of the SDGs. So this is broken down into indicators, and every country has to report on their progress towards achieving these indicators. So you can say, well, for the first time, after the Brundtland Commission introduced the idea and the concept of sustainable development, for the first time in 2017, the world agreed on a strategy to achieve it, a holistic strategy, objectives signed off by almost all nations in the world. And this is the reason why you see, and remember the graph I showed you about the publications from the British Library, this is the reason why you see this sharp increase of publications on sustainable development since 2015, because the SDGs have really given a very strong push to this whole debate. But to conclude, I would also like to mention that there are critical perspectives, and regardless where you look at, if it's blogs or academic publications, you find the same direction of critique. Just reading out the first one here, the word has become such an all-encompassing buzzword, something that encompasses so many different aspirations and agendas that, according to this author, sustainability doesn't really mean anything anymore. And here in this academic article, which is called Critical Sustainability, the authors say there's a certain shallowness, ambiguity associated with sustainability. And sometimes it's also used as an excuse, maybe. We say, well, we act according to the principle of sustainability, but then, well, it's just really symbolic. It doesn't really mean that we haven't changed our behavior, that neither governments nor individual consumers really live by the standards of sustainability, so it often stays with the debate. So we have the debate, we have the vision, but what do we actually do in order to achieve it? So I leave this open for discussion, and I started with the notion that sustainability has moved from being a fuzzy concept to concrete action, and a very important concept that guides global politics today. But, well, as you have seen here, maybe it has actually become more fuzzy, and it has developed into a concept that is now very difficult to handle because it has so many different meanings. But this is, well, one of the reasons why we have this summer school, I guess, because there is the need, there's the necessity to discuss it further. So let me finish with two photos I recently took in Ecuador. So why should I conclude with Ecuador? Because there's been a very important development in this country in South America, in the Andes, and so you can see here the pictures that I've taken at about 3,500 meters. What you see here are actually clouds. This is not water, these are clouds, so I was standing above the clouds. And so Ecuador is a country which has given the idea of sustainability a lot of thought. And about 15 years ago, almost 15 years ago, Ecuador gave itself a new constitution, which was the first constitution in the world which enshrined the rights of nature, the rights of Mother Earth. So the rights of nature became an equal right alongside with the rights of humans. So this was a very important initiative in a way that, of course, received attention across the world. It wasn't really something that was only debated just in Ecuador, but it has become a model for not necessarily other countries, but for civil society movements all over the world to really think about and discuss the Ecuadorian way and approach to development. And it was discussed under the heading of Buen Vivir, good life. What does good life mean? Means you can only enjoy a good life if there's a balance between the needs of humans, but also the needs of our planet, nature, resources, the very core of the sustainability idea that we find here. Thank you very much for your attention. Sorry about the technical troubles in the beginning. I hope that you could still follow the presentation in that format.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Dosch, for this thought-provoking keynote. And we were all with you when the technical problems happened, so everybody is happy that he is not in front then. So yeah, this was a very interesting keynote, and I would like to encourage, we don't have a lot of time, we just have 5 minutes, but if there are, I'm sure there are many questions, and we cannot really answer those questions, and keynotes usually do not have question-answer periods, but if there's a burning question, please write it in the chat, and Elisabeth Reich will forward it to me, and then we can ask it to you. One question I have is, like you said, like so clearly a lot of things have happened, so it became a very important topic. Sustainability, the SDG goals were developed, and it's much broader than just renewable energies. But you also said, like there were no real success stories yet. So if there are success stories, definitely it's always like the climate debate. It's like renewable energies, wind energy, solar energy, electrical cars, all that changed considerably. So might it be necessary to have like more foci that become developed so that the entire topic area of sustainability can move more successfully forward and will not end up too fuzzy in the long run? What do you think are the most important factors to write real success stories in future?
Yeah, the thing is that I mean, I could only really talk about the broad picture, and the broad picture maybe tends to be negative, also under the impression of recent developments that we see related to climate change. But what I think needs more attention to achieve really this global success on sustainability is really the SDGs, which sometimes I feel are treated as a vision that is important, but it seems to me also from the data that we have seen so far that it's not really taken as seriously as it should be. I think, and Michael, you have already mentioned the examples that our understanding of sustainability is still rather narrow, that there is still not a common understanding of this more holistic, multi-dimensional idea of sustainability that also really includes social and political aspects. So it is very, very important, and don't get me wrong, to focus on renewable energy, to focus on resource supply, but we should not ignore really that sustainability is so much more than that. And I think, well, there is still a lack of understanding in this regard. And although, as I said before, the whole world has basically agreed on the SDGs, there are few governments, there are few nations that are actually acting along this vision and trying really to make it happen. Just think about Germany here. Do we really explicitly discuss the sustainable development goals here? It seems to me that from a Western perspective, from a European perspective, this is still more a concept that was developed for developing nations, but doesn't really seem to apply to industrialized nations. So the idea that there should not be a difference anymore between donors that contribute to the development of Latin American, Asian, African states, but that it's a two-way street, right? So that we all have to work towards achieving the SDGs. And this is, of course, the ambitions that everyone had when they signed off on the SDGs. This has still not taken hold, in my view. And I believe we can only achieve the real successes that really take us forward if we take this vision, we take this program seriously.
Okay, thank you so much. There are questions from the floor coming now, so let's see. I try to put them together since we don't have much time. First question is another big question, of course, since this is like really like global North and global South coming together. Here is one question. There have been many hindrances for the SDGs in Africa. What would be the resolution to this briefly? So I'm sure you don't have a brief answer for that, but of course it's a major question for a continent like Africa. It's a very different story as for a continent like Europe.
Well, this is indeed a very big question. There's no easy answer to that. So in the case of sub-Saharan Africa in particular, we have, of course, a long history of external dependencies, but also a long history of political instability, of development that was not directed to the betterment of the situation and the livelihoods of the populations, but well, in the short answer, I really cannot talk about the nuances, but was more directed towards the development and the interest of elites. So it's a very complex mixture of external and internal factors. It's also a lack of investments into education, for example, for many decades, that has been a hindrance for a development process. Always keeping in mind that the term development is also very controversial. So I could easily give another presentation on development. At least in the case of sustainability, we agree that it's a positive term. Some say, well, it's fuzzy, well, it's trying to do too much at the same time, and it lacks specification and clarity. But in the case of development, you have a whole debate about development maybe being a Eurocentric idea, being even racist, right? So this is a much more difficult discussion to have. But in the case of sub-Saharan Africa, I would simply say at this point that it's a very, very complex situation that is, of course, related to post-colonialism. It's related to the fact that Africa is integrated into the world community or the world economy as a continent that supplies resources, but does not produce much. And it has to do with the complex political situations, relations between populations and elites, governance systems, and so on and so on. The question then immediately emerges, usually when we do this in seminars, so why has Asia advanced so fast and Africa hasn't? A key answer, and I'm not going to elaborate any further, is education. And it's also a successful attempt to reduce external dependencies. And the fact that Asian countries, for example, were never to the same extent, by and large, subject to the hegemonic interests of the Western world. I say by and large, where there are other examples, Vietnam, Indonesia, for example, that most African countries experienced.
There are several more questions coming in. It's always like that. We don't have the time. So I will forward those questions to you. And the ones who actually came up with those questions, it would be great if you could write to Professor Dosch, maybe Jörn, JOERN.Dosch, DOSCH at uni-rostock.de. and ask those questions, since they are all interesting, and there are 5 more questions here. Just one short, it's a longer question, but one short point, and maybe you can try to answer it in 1 to 2 minutes. Here is a critical question about treaty making in general. Kyoto Protocol, Paris Accord, is this the most successful way to go? Or do you see like do you observe any dynamics inside the political arena to seek new approaches beyond treaties?
Well, treaties are the core. I mean, there is no real alternative to it, and it's about the implementation of treaties that matter. So we have successes, that's for sure, related to the Kyoto Protocol already. The Paris Climate Change Accord is extremely important. I think we all agree that it's not enough to sign agreements, to sign treaties. It is important to implement them. But I don't really see any real alternatives to that, because there are actually other examples where countries have tried to work more on a voluntary basis. Usually experience tells us that it doesn't work as well as formal treaties. So it's always better to have some kind of agreement, even if it's not a formally binding treatment, than no understanding at all. But at the end of the day, I think we still need this contractual system in international relations. We still need international law. There is simply no real alternative to organizing our approach towards achieving sustainability in this specific context, but also generally, I think. So I haven't encountered any other successful approach, really, I have to say, right? And so just the last remark on that, when the US government under Donald Trump decided to really leave the Paris Climate Accord aside and said, well, we are not following that anymore, and we don't care about this anymore, really. This was a major blow. And this example alone shows us how important this formal commitment to treaties is, because obviously this sets a very bad precedent. Fortunately, well, the Biden administration has reversed this course of action and is now, again, very much in favor of multilateralism again and multilateral solutions. So again, this is really the bottom line here. There is no alternative to multilateralism. We can't do it any other way. The only problem is really that compliance, and it's one thing to really agree on something, but then make it happen. And this is also my slight critique of the SDGs. It's a wonderful vision, it's a wonderful agenda, but I think not enough action has been taken yet, really, to implement this very important vision.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think, like, don't overestimate those treaties and those goals, but don't underestimate them either, since they really are very, very important. And we are one huge step forward in the entire history of SDG goals and sustainable development. Yeah, thank you so much for those ideas you shared with us. And more questions will come directly to you. And I think that really sets the stage in a wonderful way for this summer school.